Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone, and tonight is one of our neoliberalism shows. Topic is Struggle with Neoliberalism Over the Climate Continues. I'm sorry to be a bit late tonight. It was an interesting night here in my apartment house. There was a general fire alarm in the whole building, not restricted to any particular apartment. And that was creating a good deal of excitement. And as a result, I got to Dee Pierce's show only quite late. And then we began to talk about a hard topic for the night, which was what's going on in the educational system of the military, in Israel, and specifically the very racist and I'll say pseudo-Nazi views. They're actually very similar to Nazi views, but in reverse, being espoused by some of the rabbis who are teaching the military, in Israel. And they're basically indoctrinating the soldiers with this stuff. If the indoctrination is as depicted in certain sources that we covered, this is really a very serious matter because it's creating all kinds of attitudes inside of the military, which are supporting the genocidal activities of the Israelis. Anyway, I got absorbed in that, and before I knew it, it was already 9:05, and I realized I was late for this one, which is, of course, it's about a very important subject, but it's not quite, it doesn't get you so emotionally tied up, as that other issue does. So anyway, I commend that show to you, and I will now take care of our business for the evening. I just shared it on Facebook. So I am now ready to start here. And let's go with the story on the Mountain Valley Pipeline, which appeared in Common Dreams. In fact, all our stories tonight are stories of neoliberalism, come from Common Dreams tonight. So, the FERC okays completion of reckless Mountain Valley Pipeline. And there's a photo of the White House, of course, through the gates just outside. I've been at those gates myself doing some demonstrating, but that was for Medicare for All. Anyway, quote, appalling is the headline, unquote. Mountain Valley Pipeline gets 2 more federal approvals. And the tagline is, we're extremely disappointed but never surprised by the results of a system created for profit, unquote, said one campaigner. Quote, you'll never give up on defending our lives and the natural environment that makes life possible, unquote. And that's a really good tagline. It's one we all ought to remember and put into practice. We should never give up on defending our lives and the natural environment that makes life possible, unquote. This one is by Jessica Corbett, and the date is December 20th, 2023, just yesterday. Frontline climate campaigners renewed pledges to continue fighting against the Mountain Valley Pipeline on Tuesday when U.S. Um, federal regulators decided that Mountain Valley Pipeline could raise its gas transportation rates and have more time to build an expansion. Quote, the federal government claims to recognize the urgency of the climate crisis while allowing the fossil fuel industry to further it, said Russell Chisholm, managing director of the Protect Our Water Heritage Rights Coalition, in response to the pair of Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, pair of their orders. Quote, during the past decade of repeated delay, budget increase, and environmental violation, thousands have resisted the reckless Mountain Valley Pipeline and its Southgate extension. And we are never going away, unquote, he vowed. Quote again, our resistance is the fossil fuels industry's greatest nightmare. We're only growing more powerful, unquote. MVP is set to cross 303 miles of Virginia and West Virginia, plus the Southgate extension into North Carolina. Largely thanks to outgoing U.S. Senator Joe Manchin, language to expedite construction of the partially completed gas pipeline was included in the debt ceiling law that President Joe Biden was able to negotiate with congressional Republicans this year. Now, notice he didn't have to negotiate any compromise with congressional Republicans concerning the debt ceiling. Joe Biden could have minted $100 trillion platinum coin, and that would have put to bed the debt ceiling law forever. Virtually forever. For the foreseeable future. There would be no debt ceiling issue anymore. He didn't have to negotiate with the congressional Republicans. He didn't have to negotiate with Joe Manchin. He chose to negotiate with them because he thought that a worse consequence would come from minting a platinum coin. By now, he even knows about a platinum coin. That fool. The new FERC order allowing the rate hikes, which critics worry would be passed on to customers, notes that MVP now estimates construction will cost over $6.6 billion, rather than the earlier estimate of $3.7 billion. It also says that MVP, the joint venture involving 5 energy companies, quote, asserts that the primary drivers of the increased costs were permitting delays caused by ongoing legal challenges to the project, which have persisted since construction began in early 2018. Jessica Sims, Appalachian Voices, Virginia field coordinator, responded that, quote, the Mountain Valley Pipeline's delay and balloon construction costs owed to the company's insufficient planning and choice of route, deficient permit applications, and lax construction practices. The resulting violations, fines, permit vacations, and consent orders are of the company's own making, and they should not have been granted permission to financially pass those mistakes on to consumers. True words were never spoken. John Sokolow tweeted, shame on at FERC. Ignoring science and the clear weight of public opinion demonstrates yet again the corporate capture of regulatory agencies that don't regulate. FERC extends MVP Southgate certificate for an additional 3 years. That was done from Great Falls, Virginia, which is around the corner from where I'm sitting. Not literally around the corner, but essentially around the corner. A couple of towns over. Very near. Along with the rate order, FERC Commissioners Mark Christie, Allison Clements, and Willie Phillips approved a 3-year extension for MVP to complete the North Carolina project. Commissioner James Danley did not participate in the decisions, and the commission's 5th seat is vacant. Why is it vacant? Appalachian Voices North Carolina program manager Jim Ridgegraham called the move appalling, quote unquote, while Jason Crazy Bear Keck, co-founder of 7 Directions of Service, said that, quote, we are extremely disappointed but never surprised by the results of a system created for profit, unquote. Profits over people. Remember the essence of neoliberalism. 1. FERC's decision to extend MVP Southgate's certificate of, quote, public need, unquote, which subjects our streams, rivers, and community members to seizing of land and irreversible pollution against our will, with no proof of need, is a crime against us and future generations. We will never give up on defending our lives and the natural environment that makes life possible. And the Sierra Club tweeted, breaking at FERC extends Mountain Valley Pipeline Southgate certificate 3 years. We're disappointed in FERC's decision to grant an extension. Our fight to ensure this extension never sees completion is not over. If Biden did not want this, it would not have happened. MVP opponents highlighted that Democratic North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper and other elected officials from the state have spoken out against the 75-mile extension, which was initially supposed to be completed this past June. Quote, this project is unnecessary for North Carolinians, unquote, said Emily Sutton of the Haw River Assembly, stressing the opposition from residents and officials, including Cooper. The health and safety of our communities in the Haw River watershed should not be jeopardized for the profits of fossil fuel interests. We will continue to fight to protect the people and places we love, unquote. As FERC released its MVP orders on Tuesday, Appalachians Against Pipelines, which has been fighting the project for over 5 years, said that protesters are now, quote, facing increased repression from the state and the companies behind the pipeline, unquote, and called for solidarity actions across the United States January 29th to 31st, quote, to bring the fight to every company and bank involved. Quote, with every work stoppage, Mountain Valley Pipeline and their state collaborators have become more and more desperate to criminalize dissent, quote, according to the group. Quote, MVP is suing more than 40 activists across multiple jurisdictions in Central Appalachia for millions of dollars. More than 20 pipeline fighters have been arrested on a variety of charges since the summer, including ludicrous abduction felonies. Appalachians Against Pipeline declared that, quote, we know why state and private forces are doing this, because they're terrified of the communities we have built, the fight we are waging, because they know that we are unafraid and that we won't back down, unquote. Yet another instance of people struggling against the profits over people mentality. the neoliberal mentality. Hey Kay, hey Steve, how you two doing? So the next piece is also from Common Dreams. And here's a do not enter sign on display due to floodwaters near the tidal basin in Washington, D.C. on March 23rd, 2023. And the headline is: A federal court says climate case against big oil can stay local. Quote, it's time for these companies to give up their losing arguments to escape the courtroom and instead prepare to explain their well documented history of lying about the dangers of fossil fuels to members of a jury, unquote. Another one by Jessica Corbett, this time December 19th, 2023. Yet another federal appeals court on Tuesday delivered a blow to big oil's efforts to evade responsibility for the climate emergency, ruling that the District of Columbia's consumer protection lawsuit against fossil fuel giants can proceed in D.C. Superior Court. By the way, D.C. Superior Court is the lowest level court in D.C. It's not the highest level court, it's the lowest level court. As dozens of U.S. communities and states have sought to make polluters pay through climate liability suits in recent years, companies have attempted to move the cases from local to federal courts, where they are far more likely to be dismissed. The ruling stems from a case filed in the local court by D.C. Attorney General Brian Schwab's predecessor, Carl Racine, in 2020. He accused profit-hungry BP, Chevron, ExxonMobil, and Shell of violating the district's Consumer Protection Procedures Acts with decades of campaigns to, quote, deceive and mislead the public about the threat of global warming and the damaging nature of their fossil fuel products, unquote. Judge Naomi Rao, an appointee of President Donald Trump, a fossil fuel industry ally, wrote for the panel Tuesday that, quote, the district brought suit exclusively under the D.C. Code, and companies have provided no basis for federal jurisdiction, unquote. With its unanimous ruling, the D.C. Circuit is now the eighth federal appeals court to reject industry arguments, joining the first, second, third, fourth, eighth, ninth, and 10th circuits, according to the Center for Climate Integrity, CCI, which tracks such cases. Judges from across the ideological spectrum have once again unanimously rejected big oil's desperate arguments to avoid facing the evidence of their climate lies in local courts, unquote, CCI President Richard Wiles said in response to the decision. Quote, it's time for these companies to give up their losing arguments to escape the courtroom and instead prepare to explain their well-documented history of lying about the dangers of fossil fuels to members of a jury, unquote. He added, quote, the people of D.C. deserve their day in court to hold big oil accountable. Throughout this year, the right-wing U.S. Supreme Court has repeatedly refused to aid the fossil fuel industry's attempts to shift cases to federal courts. Meanwhile, the lawsuits have continued to mount, with officials from Oregon's Multnomah County, by the way, that's Portland, and California filing suits against oil and gas companies in June and September, respectively. In the end-of-year roundup released Tuesday, CCI details other highlights, including the U.S. Department of Justice backing communities suing fossil fuel companies. Quote, growing calls for DOJ action from Congress and new research revealing that, quote, industry scientists predicted the climate crisis with eerie accuracy as early as the 1980s. Well, I don't know about that. It seems like industry scientists have been continuously underestimating the severity of the climate crisis. From the 1980s up until now, we're always finding corrections. The longer we go, the more corrections there are to earlier projections. Quote, polling shows that a majority of voters across the political spectrum continue to support holding polluters accountable, making them pay their fair share of climate damages, unquote, the group noted, and quote again, as we enter 2024, climate accountability is reaching an unprecedented level of um, 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 momentum, unquote. So people are insisting on people over profits, and that's becoming more and more prominent. But profits over people is still winning sometimes. Okay. Neoliberalism is still winning sometimes. Anti-neoliberalism is not, is still not winning. Doc, I caught your post on Facebook advertising empowering democracy, but there was no share button. Please see if it can be fixed. I will check that out right now, Steve. Hang on a second. Let me see what could possibly be wrong. Let me open Facebook again and go check it out. Okay, I have a share button on my page. That was from last night. I'm sure I shared this. Okay, Steve, you might see if it's appeared now. So that we can drum up some subscribers for you. Thank you, Steve. I would love that, of course. I would love that. Thank you, Steve. Okay, so let's move on. Wise Fidelista, subscribe to my channel. Oh, Wise Fidelista. Aha. Interesting to get a Fidelista. Another Common Dreams piece on the struggle with the neoliberals for people over profits. 170 scientists urge Biden to kill, quote, staggering, unquote, LNG build-out. This is from Common Dreams also. And the headline is, or the tagline is, experts warn that expanding liquefied natural gas infrastructure will put the United States, quote, on a continued path towards escalating climate chaos. It's another Jessica Corbett piece. This is from December 19th, 2023. Echoing recent calls from frontline leaders, green groups, and healthcare workers, 170 scientists on Tuesday pressured U.S. President Joe Biden to reject the proposed liquefied natural gas terminal in Louisiana, known as CP2, and other pending LNG projects. Quote, we are scientists who write to you with ever increasing urgency as our climate continues to deteriorate, to implore you to stop the dash to increase exports of liquefied natural gas, LNG, unquote, wrote the scientists, including Rose Abramoff, Robert Howarth, Mark Jacobson, Peter Kaunas, Michael Mann, Sandra Steingraber, Farhana Sultana, and Aradhana Tripathi. All well known, the absolute stars are undoubtedly Michael Mann and Peter Kaunas, not necessary in that order. While stressing their opposition to Venture Global's Calcasieu Pass 2 CP2 project, they also emphasized that, quote, the magnitude of the proposed build-out of LNG over the next several years is staggering. Quote, for years, the science has been overwhelmingly clear that we must stop expanding fossil fuel extraction and infrastructure and rapidly transition to renewable energy. We have simply no runway left and little margin for error, unquote, the scientists warned. Quote again, in fact, we are rapidly passing tipping points that are further escalating the climate crisis. Quote, altogether, the science to date shows that spiraling emissions of the climate super pollutant methane are a major contributor to the ongoing failure to meet agreed upon global emissions targets, stabilize the climate, unquote, they explained. Quote, the science also shows that LNG facilities are inherently leaking operations and are prodigious emitters of the methane, unquote. This letter cites a forthcoming study by Howarth, a Cornell University scientist, my alma mater, Cornell, that shows LNG is at least 24% worse for the climate than coal. CP2 alone would produce over 20 times more planet heating pollution than ConocoPhillips' Willow Oil project in Alaska, which the Biden administration is also under fire for green lighting. The letter highlights that, quote, these climate-wrecking emissions are on top of prodigious amounts of toxic air pollutants, including carcinogenic benzene, released into local environments both from the LNG facilities themselves and the upstream drilling and fracking operations that feed them, unquote. Quote again, LNG plants and their associated infrastructure pose serious health harms to surrounding communities and worsen environmental injustice, as scientists pointed out. So there it is again, profits over people rather than people over profits. Quote, these facilities are disproportionately located in communities of color and low-income communities on the Gulf Coast already overburdened with pollution, unquote. Quote, you have often said that your policies will be guided by listening to the science, unquote, they wrote to Biden, and quote again, the scientists, we are telling you in clear and unambiguous terms, that approving CP2 and other LNG projects will undermine your stated goals of meaningfully addressing the climate crisis and put us on a continued path toward escalating climate chaos. We implore you to turn back from this course, reject CP2 and other fossil fuel export projects, and put us on a rapid and just trajectory off fossil fuels, unquote. Opposition to CP2 may already be having some effect. Advocates had expected the FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, to consider the project this fall, but so far the agency hasn't. The Louisiana Bucket Brigade Director, Ann Ross, said last week that, quote, every month it is not on the agenda, we consider a victory because it means it's not getting part of the federal approval that it needs, unquote. Well, Venture Global lacks the permission required for CP2. The Biden administration has infuriated frontline communities, scientists, and voters concerned about the climate emergency by expanding LNG exports, enabling projects like Willow and the Mountain Valley Pipeline, and continuing fossil fuel lease sales for public lands and waters. Biden, who was elected in 2020 after running on bold climate promises, is now seeking re-election next year and could again face Republican former President Donald Trump, a major ally to the fossil fuel industry. Quote, the president, quote, must reject new fossil fuel projects starting with CP2 that poison communities, that will harm young people far into the future, unquote. That was said by Michelle Weindling, political director of the youth-led Sunrise Movement, on Friday. Quote, he can't one day cave to fossil fuel millionaires and the next throw a bone to young people. That's not how science works, and young voters know it, unquote. Of course they do. And old voters know it too, by the way. Voters like me, we know it too. And we don't want our children and grandchildren to be poisoned by the CO2 and the methane that is emitted into the air. We want the air to be clean. We want there to be a future for our children and our grandchildren. We might not have many years to go, but they do. And we want to put them ahead of the freaking fossil fuel companies. And the fossil fuel companies need to remember that we oldsters vote too, and we vote in large numbers. And we don't like it when people harm not only ourselves in our last years, but also our children, okay, and grandchildren as the years go by. The longest night of the year, happy solstice. Oh, thank you for pointing that out, Steve. I forgot. I forgot it was the solstice. Today? The solstice is tonight, evidently. That means starting tomorrow night, the days are getting longer again. I always loved that. I don't like these short days. Never did, never will. I like the long days and the short nights. Well, here we go. Not with just news, but with an opinion piece. And this opinion piece relates to Elon Musk, one of the leading neoliberals around today. This piece was, there's Elon, photographed on the red carpet ahead of Heidi Klum's 2022 Halloween party at Sake no Hana at Moxie LES. I don't know where Moxie LES is. I guess it's in New York City. On October 31st, 2022 in New York City. Elon Musk's Swedish problem. Yes, Swedish problem. Has the anti-union billionaire finally met his match? Looks like I'm being joined by Dee. Hello, Dee. How are you doing?
Okay, and how are you doing, Joe?
I'm doing fine. I understand from Steve Wolfbrandt this is the longest night of the year.
Yes, it is. It's the winter solstice.
It's the winter solstice, and that's starting tomorrow. The days will get longer.
Yes,
I'm
very
happy
good
to
news.
say. I love that. That's very good news. I
Yes, it is.
trust the rest of your show is very interesting, as interesting
Yeah,
as the part that I was able to catch.
eh, yes, I just found that whole show, listening to that video and how these rabbis were talking. It was like mental gymnastics. The brain just, you have to twist your brain around to try to put together what they're saying.
Yes, because you never heard any rabbis talk like this in this country.
No,
I mean, that does not go on,
no.
does not go on anywhere. Anyway, what that show was about was the Nazi rabbis who live in Palestine and who were part of the educational program, okay, of the military education effort. Uh, they are rabbis who act exactly like the Nazi people acted. The only difference is that their object of oppression is the Palestinians. And they say exactly the same thing about the Palestinians that the Nazis had to say about the Jews in Europe during the 1930s. It's a real mirror image piece. It is so infuriating. You can't believe how infuriating it is. But back to the business for tonight. We are now on our fourth article illustrating the profits over people versus people over profits struggle that we're having in the world right now, and especially here in the United States. And we're covering our first opinion piece of the night, which is an opinion piece from Common Dreams that I'm sharing on the screen. And that is about Elon Musk's Swedish problem. Has the anti-union billionaire finally met his match? Unquote. For the first time in his life, the man who opposes any lords and peasants sort of thing, quote unquote, may be learning a lesson in labor solidarity. And this is written by by Leopold, the old union guy, very faithful to the labor movement for a very, very long time now. He must be nearly as old as I am. Who knows? He might even be a bit older. Guess I could look that up, but I didn't bother. Quote, I disagree with the idea of unions. I just don't like anything which creates a lords and peasants sort of thing. As if the unions create a lords and peasants sort of thing. The lords and peasants sort of thing is when the unions don't exist. Anyway, Elon Musk said this November 30th, 2023. Unfortunately for Elon Musk, the lord and master of the Tesla electric automobile company, the Swedish peasants have grabbed their pitchforks. 120 Tesla mechanics in 7 service centers are demanding a collective agreement with the company, one that aligns with all labor management agreements in this heavily unionized country. Approximately 90% of the Swedish workforce falls under such agreements. Wish it were so here in the United States. Musk isn't having any of it. How dare a union tell him what he can and cannot do with his workers? For the first time in his life, however, he may be learning a lesson in labor solidarity. The 120 peasant mechanics are not alone. By the way, who wrote this? Did I say? Oh, yeah, right. It was Les Leopold. The Nordic countries are extremely proud of their labor management system. Strikes are very rare as agreements are formed sector by sector to find equitable ways to share the bounty they've produced. After decades of mediating the workplace using this system, Nordic workers and most managers as well believe it is the backbone of their country's high standards of living. Nordic labor unions are understandably highly protective of their collective labor management system. They want every employer to participate in it, including Tesla, which has a small but robust Nordic market because the region fully embraces electric vehicles. To protect what they have achieved, unions are more than willing to engage in sympathy strikes and boycotts to force recalcitrant employers to accept the system. Their strength depends on a simple but powerful working class idea: solidarity. An injury to one is an injury to all. As a result, these 120 mechanics have gained an enormous amount of support. Garbage is piling up in front of Tesla offices because the sanitation workers won't pick it up. Janitorial workers won't clean the Tesla showrooms either. The postal workers won't deliver license plates for Tesla cars. When Tesla appealed to the courts to allow delivery or for Tesla to pick them up themselves, the courts ruled in favor of the boycott. The dock workers won't unload Musk's cars in Sweden. Danish dock workers also are blocking Tesla shipments heading to Sweden. If the strike is not settled by December 20th, Norway's largest private sector union said it would block the transit of Tesla cars to Sweden. A large Danish pension fund, Pension Denmark, has divested its Tesla stocks. Then other Nordic pension funds are applying pressure as well. To be sure, the richest man in the world, asshole that he is, sorry for that editorial comment, will not be easily cowed. Musk certainly has the resources to hold out and test the union's resolve. As witnessed with Twitter, he's even willing to harm his own enterprises to put his personal stamp on them. It was Musk's idea to push the risky autopilot system on Tesla cars and to mislead buyers about its abilities. 2 million cars are now being recalled. If Musk doesn't settle the strike soon, his worries could quickly grow, especially if the heady spirit of solidarity spreads southward to Germany and the 11,000 Tesla workers at the company's Berlin Gigafactory. To head off an organizing effort by IG Metall, the largest union in Germany, Musk announced a 4% raise in November for German Tesla workers, along with a bonus to make up for inflation. It had better be a pretty big bonus because fuel prices are driving inflation in Germany up to the heavens, which, of course, is a result of the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline. Yes, it was by the United States. And also, yes, another part of the inflation is due to the silly sanctions that the West European nations have imposed on Russia that have done nothing but strengthen the Russian economy as it turns to Asia to make up for the sanctions. It's done nothing but hurt countries all over Europe, especially Germany, which is deindustrializing faster than any nation on earth. They're deindustrializing, absolutely. Nevertheless, union organizers claim workers are signing up in droves. It's unclear how long Musk can keep the union at bay. Can solidarity spread to the United States? I sure hope so. Musk's biggest worry is not the 120 Swedish mechanics, it's the organizing efforts of the United Automobile Workers Union, UAW, in the U.S. that poses the biggest threat. Buoyed by its enormous victories over the big three U.S. automakers, GM, Ford, and Stellantis, the UAW, led by Sean Fain, has Tesla in its sights. As Fain colorfully put it, it's going to come down to the people that work for him deciding if they want their fair share or they want him to fly himself to outer space at their expense, unquote. Tesla is using the usual toolbox of anti-union techniques to keep the UAW out, many of which the National Labor Relations Board has ruled are illegal. But that battle is just beginning, and Musk is no doubt thinking he can't afford to show weakness by caving into a handful of workers, 120 in Sweden. Weakness abroad might further embolden workers here to join up with the UAW. Will the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, ILWU, join with the Nordic unions? Musk also should be worrying about the ILWU, what the ILWU could do to his cars. It's possible that this militant labor union will soon refuse to handle any and all Teslas in a show of support for the Swedish mechanics. While labor law in the United States makes sympathy strikes much more difficult than in Scandinavia, conducting them here is not impossible. The ILWU, which represents 22,000 dock workers on the West Coast, has a long history of striking on behalf of others. On May 2008, the union launched a one-day strike at 29 ports to protest the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. 2010, 2014, and 2021, it refused to handle cargo on Israeli ships in honor of community protests against Israel's repression of the Palestinians. Where are they now? It shut down the ports for 8 minutes and 46 seconds in 2020 to show solidarity with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and other victims of police violence. And when apartheid ruled in South Africa, it conducted numerous job actions intended to punish the institutional practice of discrimination. The ILWU is yet to say whether they will join in the Scandinavian struggle. But if these dock workers do, it will be precisely because solidarity has always been the essence of union power. Standing together is the only way labor organizations can successfully challenge corporate power. Unfortunately, only 6% of unions in the U.S. business sector belong to unions, down from nearly 35% in the mid-1950s, and a far cry from the 90% covered by union agreements in Sweden. Nevertheless, in the U.S., positive perceptions of unions are rapidly rising as a new generation of workers take on companies like Amazon and Starbucks. After hitting their lowest approval rating in 2010, 48% according to Gallup, union approval climbed to 71% in 2021, the highest since the 1960s. Musk, of course, could care less about union approval ratings. Like every other multi-billionaire, he believes he knows best about nearly everything, or how else could he have become so rich? He knows how he became so rich. He cheated. To Musk, it's a violation of natural law as defined by him to concede any power to labor unions. He created Tesla, and therefore he gets to run it. The unions be damned. But if union solidarity holds in Scandinavia, Musk will have no choice but to accept the Nordic model, at least in those countries, or scuttle his market, as he seems to be doing with Twitter in Europe. Whether the power of solidarity spreads elsewhere here will depend on the courage of unions like the ILWU and the UAW. In the era of rising autocratic power, one did augur a good new year if the 120 Swedish mechanics bested Musk. okay, if they bested Musk. It certainly would augur for a good new year, but I have to add the following. Musk may think he has a big hold on Sweden with respect to Tesla, but we all have to keep in mind Sweden can import electric cars from China as long as uh, they're not putting together foolish sanctions on China. China is developing some really terrific electric cars that can compete, with Tesla and that are a lot cheaper. And maybe Sweden can turn to the Chinese and get some really good ones if Tesla continues to give them trouble. Sweden might even be able to get the Chinese to invest in an automobile factory inside of Sweden to produce these Chinese models in Sweden, and they might be perfectly willing to allow the workers to unionize uh, in the context of the Nordic model, of unionization. What would Musk do then? What would he do then? I would like to see what he would do then. So, that's the news about the struggle over neoliberalism that's still going on all over the world. Okay, today I saw a video by Radhika Desai and Michael Hudson talking about the continuing struggle with the neoliberals, all over the world. They give a great historical perspective, on neoliberalism, and also talk a lot about circumstances in which neoliberalism, in which the ideology of neoliberalism was believed to be dead before, but it always managed to come back. It morphs in various ways. It hides itself. It becomes invisible. And they pointed out how it's trying to do that in its modern form right now to keep itself alive. So we have to be aware of these conflicts and how they're going on. I commend the Radhika Desai and Michael Hudson stream to you. They are extremely sophisticated about the ideological struggles going on, in the world, probably uniquely sophisticated. I mean, their perspective on these struggles is respected, by everyone who knows anything about the course, of ideologies. So, Steve Wolfbrand comments and says, Nazi rabbis insane. It is. It is just so infuriating and so insane. And the whole ideology, it's not only that they hate the Palestinians, but they're hating on secular Jews. They're making a radical distinction between those who they consider Jews and those who they consider as enemies of their form, of Judaism. And they're applying Nazi thinking to everybody. It's not simply to the Palestinians. I mean, those people are a threat to everybody. Steve Wolfbrand says, Abby Martin did a show interviewing Israeli citizens. Many said to kill the babies before they grow up to be terrorists. Disgusting. Yeah, there are lots of people in Israel saying this. They are saying this, and they seem oblivious to the fact that in return, the Palestinians might think that it's important to kill Israeli babies before they grow up to be terrorists. Because if you look at the definition of terrorism and you look at the actions of the state of Israel right now, the real terrorists in this situation, or let's say the overwhelming leaders in terrorism in this particular situation, are the Israelis themselves. Steve Oprin says, I like Elon, a strange genius. SpaceX is wonderful. But Steve, I know there's a lot about Elon that is wonderful. But when it comes to fairness to workers, when it comes to consideration for those who work for him, he's a monomaniac. That's the truth of it. Sure, he's a strange genius. SpaceX is wonderful, but his employees should not be made to pay the price for his genius. Kay says, well, I'm out of here for tonight, but love you all. We love you as well, Kay. So there is that. So, Dee, any reactions to all this?
Can I say it's just all too much, you know?
It's all too much. It feels like we're in a struggle on all fronts,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and all the time. Right now, the lead front, okay, is in Israel. Used to be in what was going on, okay, inside, okay, of Ukraine. Looks like, okay, Ukraine, okay, is winding up. It looks like that's probably going to be a total victory for Russia. They get to take over what parts of Ukraine they want to take over. That represents a problem for them. Real
Mm-hmm.
problems. That problem was discussed actually today by Alexander Mercouris, okay, and also Glenn Deason and John Mearsheimer, okay, on Glenn Deason's show in a really fascinating discussion. But a lot of people are talking about what Russia's going to do now and how far that's going to go and what the geopolitical implications of that victory are for Europe and what's going to happen to Europe over a period of time. Everybody agrees Russia is not going to turn towards Europe and try to subjugate, any part of it again. Russia is turning towards Asia, where the real economic action is at this point. And they're very concerned about that. They just want a security framework, okay, with Europe. But whether Europe will jettison, okay, the United States in favor of creating a security framework with Russia, I don't know. But in my view, I think that, okay, is very important. Okay, as for Israel, okay, and Gaza, it's up to the rest of the world to mobilize decisively through the United Nations or other organizations, okay, that exist to really put the hammer on Israel to stop these war crimes and to stop the genocide and the ethnic cleansing, okay, that's going on there. And frankly, okay, I can't wait to see that. It has to happen.
It has to happen now. It's at a critical point. It's been at a critical point for a while now. But
And it's not just at a critical point, okay, for the Gazans, but this is reminiscent of what happened, okay, to the League of Nations when it failed to respond to serious crises, but during the 1920s and the early 1930s. It became apparent that it just wasn't a useful organization anymore, and everybody abandoned it and considered it as something of a joke, as the Italians defied it, okay, and also the Nazis defied it. and anybody else who wanted to defy it, defied it, okay, and got away with it. So, if the United Nations doesn't respond here to a genocide that everybody is against, that, I mean, 90% of the world, okay, is against this. It's basically the United States and Israel and a few other countries that are dominated by the United States that is still supporting Israel on that. So if the United Nations cannot act in that situation, it's no damn good for anything important.
Yeah.
And that's about to be revealed if they can't act. And if the other nations that want to do something about this act through another organization or by themselves, that will also mean the abandonment of the United Nations by everybody. So we could be looking at the death of the United Nations as a useful organization, as well as the death of NATO, okay, as a useful organization, as well as increasingly the replacement of the international financial institutions with other new international financial institutions that serve nations better. So we might be looking at the end of the post World War II world and coming into an entirely different sort of multipolar world where the United States has a relatively minor status compared to what we have had, okay, all along. In many ways, that's going to be good.
Yes, because this is an example. What's happening in Gaza.
Yep. Yeah, this is example of how far south things have gone, of how far the evil of tolerating genocide um, and ethnic cleansing and collective punishment has spread.
Hmm.
That has to stop. The evil of neoliberalism has to stop. And we need to get the dump the corruption movement going in this country. It's essential because we need to
Oh,
get all of the Congress people who are subservient to the moneyed interests, who are supporting genocide and who are supporting collective punishment, okay, and ethnic cleansing. We need to get them out of Congress. And then we need to get out also all those who are
mhm.
supporting the profits over people philosophy of the neoliberals as well. And by the time you've covered both of those issues, you're talking about the whole frickin' Congress.
Yes,
So
because we clearly see, and we've said this over and over again on the show, that they don't represent us. They don't represent we the people.
they don't care what we think. They think they can use the money from the oligarchs to propaganda us and to stop us from acting against them. We need to prove to them that we can come together and we can vote the people they have bought with their toxic money out of office.
Yes,
So that toxic money is gone from the Congress. That's got to be our mission going forward.
yes, it does. And we really need to have a secular government. We can't have these religious fanatics, no matter what religion they are. You got to keep all that religion out.
We do, because when religion becomes fanatical, it becomes evil. It will do anything, no matter how evil, to support what it considers to be its religious imperatives. We're seeing this in Israel right now. We're seeing it in India to some degree right now.
Yes,
And we're seeing it here in the United States to some degree in what the evangelical Christians are willing to do to the rest of us
Mm-hmm.
in the context of their support for Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump doesn't come by himself, he comes with the evangelical Christians.
Mm-hmm.
And what are they going to do to other groups that are not evangelical Christians if they gain power through him?
Right. And for them too, they're Christian Zionists. They're Zionist you know, over here. And that's what separates evangelical Christians, the philosophy, I guess, over, say, in Jordan, they were talking about it, is that there's no relationship with the West because the West has this the Zionist plan. They're in sync with the Zionist. So this is where you have this separation with Christianity and the evangelical group, say over in Jordan, because of the whole Christian Zionism of the the Western evangelicals. They, want to wipe out the original Christians.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. They do.
Isn't that crazy?
They're so similar to these crazy Israelis.
Yeah,
They're so similar to them, okay, in their thinking.
they are.
They just want to
Because,
wipe out everybody that thinks differently than they do.
yeah. And there was, I guess, who was that? That AJ Plus. This was a while ago. This one of the reporters was talking to a uh, a Christian evangelical over in Israel, and she had stated why she doesn't. A reporter had asked her why she doesn't support the Palestinian Christians. There are so many of them, and she said, "Well, about with Israel and the importance of Israel, and that somehow says that God tells us that we should be good servants to the Jewish people, and all of this, it's kind of like this talk that those rabbis were talking about, that she sees herself as second class to the Jewish people, and that pretty much the Palestinian Christians over there should just, plain words, just deal with it because, God's purpose, with what she sees with the Jewish people. And I'm like, this is totally sick.
Me too. I think it's totally sick also. I mean, I think it's totally crazy. It's based on myth,
Hmm.
and the only people who believe it are authoritarian assholes. So
Yeah,
Steve Rothman says factory workers will soon be replaced by robots. Elon is working on this as well. Thought stock. Uh, Steve, I know a lot about artificial intelligence. I studied it intensely for a while during the 1990s when I was doing my work in the knowledge management field. I know there have been great advances since then, okay, in artificial intelligence, but I think the basic models are still very similar. Okay, so I think I understand the core of it, even today. Uh, I'm not worried about artificial intelligence. I think that what artificial intelligence in the end will do is to actually create further jobs. Okay, it may replace factory workers. Okay, in the automobile industry, and I would hate to see that. But new jobs can be created all the time. What we need to do is to have an engine that will create new kinds of jobs that are important for the public purpose. That engine is inherent, okay, in MMT. Specifically, it's the job guarantee program. If it is structured right and if it is implemented correctly, the job guarantee program can be a source of new jobs, constant new jobs, okay, and also new job definitions. Now, those can start out as government jobs with support actually coming from the government. But if the job guarantee program is used to fuel and seed cooperative private corporations doing public purpose work here in the United States, then we can have a whole new set of private organizations. They might be nonprofits, uh, they might be cooperatives, but they would still be profit making organizations in a narrow sense of that sort of term. And they would eventually not be controlled by the government, but would be internally controlled by the workers who are also the owners, okay, of the cooperative organizations. So it seems to me that a combination of job guarantee ideas from MMT and Rick Wolf's ideas on the cooperatives can create, okay, a whole new employment sector in various new industries. Lots and lots of new and different jobs for workers that will be made much more sophisticated because they could be educated and in fact would have a hand themselves in creating the new institutions, okay, in the new organizations. We can do this, Steve. We don't have to be worried about Elon going ahead and using artificial intelligence to replace his factory workers, because that only frees up the workers to do other things that will be necessary for our society to make the transition to green energy and to green jobs, okay, for the future. We need those workers. We don't necessarily need them, okay, to make electric cars, but the country needs them to work on the transition, to work on other good jobs that will be valuable for the public purpose. So we can handle this, Steve. All we have to do is use thinking that's available now and rigorously work with that thinking to create all kinds of new jobs. Anyway, that's not the subject for tonight. So, unless you have something more to say, Dee, I think I'm about ready to say goodnight.
Same here. I think it's time
Okay.
for us to say goodnight. And how's Bonnie doing today? I didn't ask you how Bonnie was doing.
Oh, Bonnie is doing better today. Uh, okay, when you first get through with the cataract operation,
Mm-hmm.
your vision is blurry because of all the dilation of your eyes they do, during the operation, and,
Right.
all of the medication they give you and all that stuff. But she's already beginning to see far away.
Mm-hmm.
We went to have a follow up, okay, with the doctor this morning, with the surgeon. Uh, took a look at her eyes. Everything is just fine. And on the way, on the highway, while we were driving, she could see for the
Right.
first time in a long time,
Oh,
a
good.
long distance, which she hasn't been able to see for some time now because her vision has been cloudy by the cataracts.
Mm-hmm. So that must have been really a big wow moment. You know what I'm saying? When you haven't been able to see for a while, and all of a sudden you do.
Yeah, that was exciting for her.
Yeah.
Okay, that was exciting. And
The surgery was very quick, and there was less pain than I ever thought to expect. And they even gave me a mask to put over my eyes when I sleep at night. And that
Oh,
was
wow.
good.
yes, it's something called the shield.
Uh-huh.
It's transparent, and its main purpose is to stop you from from rubbing your eyes, putting your hands on your eyes,
Okay.
and you wear it while sleeping, okay, because
Mhm.
you can't consciously control it then. Okay, and she has to wear that for about a week.
Okay.
Okay, but then it'll be over it. And last night she found uh, she wasn't sure she could sleep with the shield on, but it turned out she could, and she could even turn on her side, and it still worked okay. So
Oh,
she
that's good.
slept well overnight. We, of course, had to get up early again in order to go for this other thing. We tend to get up late and stay up.
Right.
That's what our
Right.
schedule is like. But we had to get up at 5:45 for the surgery yesterday, and then for the follow-up appointment at 6:45 to get that done.
Oh, my
So
goodness.
we're hoping to be able to get back to a normal schedule for tomorrow.
Uh-huh.
Uh, okay, and judging from my experience, she should finally be able to read small print on the TV screen. I'm thinking by the end of tomorrow, or maybe by the end of Saturday,
Wow.
that's going to clear up for her.
Well, good.
Yeah, and she'll be able to read the small print under, the YouTube announcements that they have. They uh, have a large title, and then they have some smaller print, and then very small print that you can hardly see if your vision is clouded, okay, at all.
Right.
But she should be able to see that very soon now, I think.
Well, that's good. That's very good news.
So right now we're very happy with the surgery and very happy with the recovery she has had. Okay, our life is pretty normal actually right now, and we expect as Christmas approaches, we will be even more normal. And I'm planning to cook a duck
Okay.
for Christmas dinner. And I'm going to try a new sauce, okay, for the duck because we've gone on a new diet uh, for some time now. And on this diet, we mostly avoid sugar
Okay.
or anything close to sugar. So the normal sauces we use for duck, we won't be able to use this year. Uh, so I'm inventing a turmeric sauce,
Okay.
which will have some raw honey on it, uh, which I think is going to be acceptable under this new diet and also very delicious, but it remains to be seen. But anyway, I'm going to try that on this duck, and I think it's going to be great. So anyway, we're going to have a lot of fun trying that. And so that'll be an outstanding part of our Christmas. So, Dee, are you going to be around tomorrow night?
My mute button was on. Yes, I should be around tomorrow night.
Okay. So you'll have a program tomorrow night then,
Yes.
and I will have a dump the corruption program as well. So everybody, you will see the two of us again tomorrow night if you'd like to. We will be around, and I will try to have a rip snorting dump the corruption show for you. Okay, at that time, and I'm sure that Dee will have a very good show, which which will probably be on Palestine and Gaza tomorrow night.
Yes, I've been covering that. That's this.
Okay, will also be different. Like, for example, if any of you saw the show that Crystal, okay, and Sagar had on today, it dealt to some degree with the rabbi's rhetoric, the extremist rhetoric inside of Israel. That's going on now. But that was at most, what was it, a 6-minute segment? Okay, or 7-minute segment. But what Dee and Madeline and I did, okay, tonight was a much more lengthy program full of detail about what kind of thinking this is and what is driving it, and what crazy rhetoric is coming out of it. Okay, and I don't know of any other live streamers who are doing this kind of coverage right now. So, of course, you should be watching that as well as this show. Okay,
Yes.
okay, because nobody else is doing this stuff the way we're doing it. Okay, the team we're having with Dee and Madeline, Kay, and myself, we're working together very well now. We're very cordial. And I think we're saying very, very good things in a very cooperative way. And I think you guys ought to tune into that, okay, as well as this.
Right, because there's a lot of things that are going on, and you have questions about, and you just like, those things don't make sense. Some of the, but maybe what you perceive as Israel, the rhetoric you're hearing from Israel, the actions of the soldiers, that everything that's going on, we're breaking down what's going on, and pretty much diving in there deep into the different situations and what's going on.
We are witnessing, okay, the destruction, okay, of Israel, as well as the destruction, okay, of Gaza. We may not be seeing the military destruction, okay, of Israel yet. But if this continues to go on, well, putting aside the possibility of a military destruction, what you're seeing now is the moral destruction, okay, of Israel as a state that deserves to exist. You are seeing this as a historical happening. It is very, very important. And if the trends keep on going, okay, as they are now, that moral destruction of Israel will, in relatively short order, be followed by its military destruction, okay, as well. Because support for Israel here in the United States will begin to fail, and the administrations will not be able, from a political point of view, to keep supporting it, sending it, okay, the munitions it needs to keep, okay, the genocide going. Then it will be open and vulnerable to military destruction. The Houthis, okay, are already attacking it, and while they're not causing much destruction in terms of physical destruction, they're causing a lot of economic disruption by making the shipping lanes hostile, okay, to Israeli shipping. They're also creating a need to do something to attack the Houthis. The Houthis are part of the axis of resistance, it's called. That also includes the Iranians, the Syrians, and Hezbollah, okay, in Lebanon. Hezbollah has 160,000 rockets and missiles and a hardened and experienced multi-thousand group, much larger than the Hamas group, of people who are guerrilla fighters to match against, okay, the Israeli army. Uh, Certain military authorities like Scott Ritter and also Colonel McGregor don't think that the Israeli armies are a match, okay, for Hezbollah, and that Israel will require the support of the United States to hold them off, okay, if they get into the war. On the other hand, if we come into the war on their side, which we might not be likely to do by then, because Israel is losing support rather fast here in this country. But even if we are willing to come in and support them, then the Iranians are likely to enter the war. It's pretty clear from the military capabilities we have now, which we can place inside of the Middle East, that we ourselves, in alliance with Israel, cannot sustain a ground war with the Iranians, Hezbollah, the Syrians, the Houthis, and possibly even the Iraqis at some point, that we cannot sustain such a ground war, okay, in the Middle East. I mean, we won't even easily be able to get our troops over there. And we only got 400,000 effectives at this point anyway. We would be severely outmatched. Haven't even mentioned the possible intervention of Russia and Turkey, okay, on the side of the people resisting the United States, okay, in Israel. So this is a war to be avoided. But Israel and we will get this war if we continue on with the genocide that's going on in Palestine. I didn't intend to cover this tonight, but once we get started talking about this, I cannot help myself.
All right, and sometimes you just feel you have to get it out.
Yes, this is so obvious to me. This is going to be a disaster for the United States, okay,
Definitely.
inside of the Middle East. And a sudden collapse of all our influence inside of the United States is not necessarily a good thing. I think our influence ought to collapse there over a period of time. Uh, the Israelis need to be forced to work with their neighbors on a solution that is satisfactory to all. That will not happen as long as we are so militarily important in that particular region. So our influence does have to be less, but a sudden collapse could create a chaotic situation that nobody can control, and that won't be good for anybody.
Yeah.
So that's not a good thing either. And I think everybody has to start thinking deeply about what is likely to happen and what needs to be done to avoid it. And of course, the only thing that really can avoid it is some solution that involves the creation of a Palestinian state. That is not necessarily going to involve the destruction of the Israeli state, but it is going to involve the displacement of the Israeli right wing from power. These crazy Israeli Nazis have to be chased out, okay, of power. More rational people have to be brought in. They have to be people who are willing to create a fair settlement and are willing to accept an independent Palestinian state and a security framework that is fair to everyone.
Exactly. And the thing that usually gets left out is the fact of security for the Palestinian people. They need security because it's always playing, Israel always says about themselves needing security. They're, they're the terrorists in the region, these right wing people over there. So you have to make sure that they're not going to be attacking the Palestinians, and the Palestinians are going to be able, to have a decent life, not to be having this constant terrorism of, the Israeli government.
Yeah, but also in a similar way, there has to be a settlement that gives the Israelis real physical security also, so that the internal politics of Israel is such that demagogues will not be able to use the security issue to reinstall these right-wing fanatics who only recognize a situation where they are on top.
Exactly.
Other people has to be subjugated. We can't allow that to happen again,
No.
or for there to be a temptation, about that. Oh, by the way, there was Scott Ritter was saying a few days ago that if the Egyptians were to come into the war, he said doesn't think they will, but if they came into the war, that two, I forget if he said tank battalions or tank divisions, but that right now, the way the Israelis are deployed, they could not stop the Egyptians from driving to Dimona in the south of Israel, at Eilat, the
Mm-hmm.
port, of Eilat. They could not stop them from driving there, taking over the place, and capturing the nuclear weapons that Israel has. Now, I have to disagree with Scott. I don't think that's going to be so easy. And even if it is relatively easy, I don't think that would happen before the Israelis would launch atomic weapons, at other people. Because if they think their atomic weapons are threatened, they're going to use those atomic weapons on their perceived enemies. And I'm not so much talking about the Palestinians now, but certainly if there's a threat from Egypt, they would use those atomic weapons on Cairo, and they would use those atomic weapons on Tehran. And they would use those atomic weapons on any nation that was attacking them and was threatening what they perceive to be their real security blanket, specifically those atomic weapons, which they have in the hundreds. If they think their existence is threatened, they're going to use them.
Right. And
And
then what happens?
and it only takes a day or two to use them.
Back at you, because they're going to get shot back at.
Sure. But the point being, for that reason, I think that any Egyptian attempt to make a drive on Dimona would actually be foolhardy,
Oh, definitely.
because it would push the Israelis to do something like that. And we cannot make the situation that dangerous. Anyway, those are just some possibilities.
Exactly.
So on that note, I think I'm going to say goodnight.
Yes, and please hit the like button, subscribe, and share.
Share. and buy us some coffees, please. We both have the Buy Me a Coffee accounts. Mine is flashing across the screen. Okay, Dee's is, what's your Buy Me a Coffee on buymeacoffee.com/
/D Peers, DEE, and then PEERS.
Okay. And then I also have a Patreon account, which is up there on the screen right next to my name. In the same style as Katie Halper, I copied what she did.
Okay.
Okay, so you can visit there also. Please do so. And both Dee and I will see you tomorrow.
Sounds great. Good night, Bonnie.
Good night.
Okay, good night.
Good night.